Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to reInvent. My name is Kaustup Patil. I lead a team of architects at AWS Professional Services, and today we'll talk about Gilead Sciences' journey of migration from VMware on-premises to AWS. We'll talk about their strategy, their best practices, lesson learned, and their recommendations for you if you are currently in the process of planning, strategizing, or on your way of migrating to AWS Cloud. Okay. So for the next hour, we'll start with overview of migration to AWS, and we'll focus more on what are the business drivers for migration journey, what is the importance of having good business drivers defined for your organization, what does it mean for your teams, for your leadership, for application teams, for developers, why is it important? We'll look at some of the examples of the compelling reasons of migrating to the cloud, and what is the importance of having those defined to have a more driven approach for your entire organization. Then Sean and Kevin, who are with me here today, they're two senior directors from Gilead, and they've been part of the migration journey, so they'll dive deep into strategy approach, how did Gilead overcome some of the obstacles for migration, and then we'll end the session with best practices and what are the free resources that are available to you to get started or enhance or accelerate your migration journey. So before you start your migration, it's very important to ask some of these basic questions. They seem basic at the beginning, but they're very important. And some of those questions can be, what does migration mean to us? What are the compelling business reasons to migrate to the cloud? And how will it help our business? Now, these seem simple questions, but they're very important. And the reason why they're important because it helps align the entire organization on why we are doing this. There will be times where you will have to prioritize some of the migration over other responsibilities that you're doing as an organization. There'll be times where you will have to prioritize some of your resources, your team's effort. So these answers and will also help you seek some leadership support and sponsorship, which is very important for having a successful migration journey. So these points will help you align the team and will act as more of a driving force in order to accelerate some of your capabilities. And I'll talk about some examples, what AWS has seen after thousands of migrations that we've done. What are the compelling reasons on why we see organizations migrate and how it helps them to accelerate? So this is some compelling reasons that we've seen. If your business is going through a change, for example, you've diversified a line of business, or you've acquired a new company, this is a great opportunity to think about how can I organize my team on the cloud? How can I take advantage of some of the scaling capabilities? One of the most important reasons we hear is, how can I enable technology to help my business grow? And what does it mean is, you may be planning to launch more software products in the market. How do I enhance the developer experience for these? How can I scale them faster? It can also be you are trying to expand to different geographies, and you have a product or a solution or mechanism in place, and you want to scale that faster. So how does that look like? How can I scale that quickly? These are some of the reasons we've seen are most compelling. And if your organization is already mature to some extent, but there's always operational efficiencies that you can improve. For example, sometimes there become too many tools in the industry or too many tools that you've adopted, and teams become sometimes not relevant or make it confused on which tool to use for what purpose. So reducing technical debt is very important. And the advantage of doing that is you can start to save on cost so that I can use that for some other advantages or some other business initiatives. One of the most important reasons we hear is reducing your licensing cost. If you can reduce some of your licensing effort and move that to AWS native services and save that money and effort. And it's not just buying a tool, it's buying it, integrating it with your system, managing it, maintaining it, running it, operating it. Even if it's a SaaS, there's some overhead. So how can I reduce that? And if that's one of your goals, that helps your business drive and acts as one of the compelling reasons. And the last is, maybe it's time to exit some of the data centers. If you're not in a technology business, you're more in a healthcare business, or you are in a pharma business, or you are in not IT, but more of a technology business, but not managing data centers. So moving your teams away from that provisioning servers and focusing them on operations, analytics, and helping business drive faster, if that's the goal, then that's a very compelling reason to start to migrate on a journey. Now let's take a look at it. We've seen some reasons. Now let's take a look at what were Gilead's business drivers for migrating. So Gilead's vision is by 2030, they want to have 10 plus new therapies delivered to the patients. That's the vision, that's the goal. So when IT teams started to realize that, hey, in order to support this vision, what do we need to do? So we looked at some of the 5 to 6 key capabilities that we can enable for enhancing the business. And those were, how can we have our business teams more data-driven decisions? And what does that mean? Having the data easily accessible for lines of businesses, easily having to have analytical power on top of it. So as a result, Gilead has built a very mature data mesh platform on AWS, which allows lines of business to share data with one another very quickly, but in a very secure and a scalable and a governed fashion. They also wanted to do, how can we reduce the developer productivity and enhance their capability to deploy things faster. So we've launched, and we are ongoing currently, a mature cloud platform engineering program, which basically starts to reduce time for developer to deploy something to the market. It has a mature end-to-end DevOps CI/CD pipeline with security built in, so you can release products quickly to dev and to production faster with security built in. So even if the person or the developer is not, or a scientist is not technically has all the knowledge, they can use the pipeline, a click-through experience to deploy things faster. And one of the key goals was, how can we meet the sustainability goal? So exiting data center and not having to manage the heavy cost of upgrading infrastructure, but also meet our sustainability goal. So these were some of the very strong, compelling reasons, in addition to the others that you see on the screen. But having the clarity of that gives your organization a very driving force that, okay, we are going towards a bigger cause, we are helping our business drive faster. So when we look at migrations, they can be daunting, they can be larger efforts. But the way we look at it is it's an opportunity to transform your organization across 3 factors: people, process, and technology. You have to put it in those 3 buckets. From a people standpoint, this gives an opportunity to upskill some of your team members, your teams, developers. And what I mean by this, how can we start to leverage more AWS native services or services, more managed services, GenAI capabilities, AI/ML solutions? So the developer or the teams that are primarily IT teams don't have to focus more on, hey, how much capacity do I have in data center? How can I manage that? Versus you're changing their focus more on, how can I automate some of the operational processes? How can I divert the time of my key team members on focusing on building and upskilling them? And AWS can help you with here. We have a training and certification program that can work with you, and you'll hear from Gilead how we worked with them on upskilling their team. We have solutions like Skill Builder, which is an online solution that you can go online and look at 100+ courses, and the team can do it either self-paced or we can have sessions scheduled in order to upskill your team. But with people also, this process, this is, in my opinion, one of the most important opportunity is optimizing your processes, and they can be optimizing automating your patching, instancing, managing your systems. We talked about CI/CD development experience. Then how can we have more data available and access to different team members in order to expedite their ability to analyze data, put AI/ML capabilities on top of it? So these are all the processes that you can automate and help you improve your output for your business. And the third is technology. So focusing more, again, the team can focus more on building resilient solutions, meeting your RPO, RTO requirements, meeting your business SLAs. How can we have regional or high availability across regions? That design and pattern and deployment is something that can help you prioritize your time, and that's another opportunity to transform some of your technology. And the last thing is AWS and even our partners keep coming with new solutions and services. So how can you continue to look at what is the right strategy for us to modernize our solutions? They can be across your business processes or some of your applications that are running on IT or on a business. How can we continue to modernize some of these capabilities? So the focus shifts more on these aspects. But with migration, there's always some challenges. And I'll call out some of the challenges that we've seen that customers face either at the beginning of migration or during migration. And then you'll hear from Sean and Kevin how Gilead Sciences basically overcame some of these challenges in order to meet their goals. We spoke about people and process. Teams is a topic that you will hear quite a lot. And what I mean by that is, it's an opportunity to look at, is my organization developed, or is my organization structured in a manner that helps my business grow faster? You'll find opportunities where some teams need to be shifted around, or they need to be have a more connection or collaboration with one another. Prioritization is important, and this is where the leadership approval comes in place, because for a successful migration to get started and continue to run and complete, prioritization is key. There will be questions at certain point where you'll have to, or your leaders have to make decisions that which aspects of migration do I prioritize versus other aspects. And it's important to have that clarity and strategy earlier, and we'll talk more about that in detail. How can you set that up in order to ensure that the migration goes faster? And then the others are more around changing any of your teams or leadership ability, developing more cloud skills. And the last thing is cloud operating model. So how can your team coordinate better with one another in order to enhance some of your capabilities? So to dive deep into some of these aspects, I would like to invite Kevin on stage, who will dive deep into Gilead's approach to VMware migration on AWS.
Thank you, Kaustav. So I'm here to kind of talk about our approach to the migration that we've done. As Kaustav kind of said, we have a mission to discover, develop, and deliver innovative therapeutics for people with life-threatening diseases. Our partnership with AWS and working on infrastructure platforms gave us those capabilities and services, and this partnership allowed us to accelerate our mission by driving innovation, scaling operations, while ensuring privacy and security and compliance along the way. Some of our core values here of doing the migration is, a pipeline, sustainable value, and preferred partner. I'm going to talk about two of the items here. Leveraging AWS, we gained advantages, shortened our traditional procurement cycles from 1 month to days, allowing us to contract and scale as needed. As a result, we increased our research and development activities in parallel, as traditionally of when you had to basically buy infrastructure, procure it, rack and stack it, build it. The other aspect of it is we all have sustainability goals from a corporate level. By leveraging AWS cloud infrastructure, we greatly contributed to our company's sustainability goals. And I'm not going to share that goal with you, but we have greatly increased that sustainability. Some of our drivers for migrating from VMware on-premise to AWS, there's two categories. You have your business drivers, you have your technical drivers. I'm not going to go in detail to all of them. I'll pick a few. Out of the business drivers, we have innovation and modernization. Through partnering with AWS and leveraging additional capabilities, we introduced such things as AI ML to help drive further data insights, as well as using services to create and streamline integrated business catalog for faster access to data across many lines of business. Additionally, consolidating business systems is what drove us to AWS by consolidating traditional data center hardware that we would have traditionally built, spent capital money up front, installed it, and then often when you build this hardware, it sits around the data center because sometimes the project gets canceled or you just don't utilize it fully. With migration of AWS, we were able to really fully utilize that scale up, that scale down ability as you need it. So as our demands changed, we could deploy to AWS and scale and contract as needed. Some of the technical drivers is improved security, scalability, and reliability. Traditionally, we had to focus on securing our brick and mortar data centers and the assets within it. Moving to AWS, we didn't have to worry about the physical data center. We didn't have to worry about securing the hypervisor. We now basically got to concentrate on securing our applications and our data. Additionally, the traditional way of scaling up and down, as I said earlier, we shortened our procurement cycles from months to days. This also, by scaling up and down, gave us cost optimizations that we didn't realize when you purchased traditional hardware. One additional benefit on the technical driver side is the increase in staff productivity. Instead of having staff building and racking and stacking hardware, and as Kostov mentioned, we now have that ability to retrain staff, and now you're working on more value to the business, helping build services and other applications onto AWS infrastructure to basically support their needs. Some of the migration options here, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but really some of the considerations here that we took about is that, again, what I talked about earlier, is to improve security, scalability, and reliability. Again, we had to traditionally focus on securing our data centers. With going to AWS, we now focus on securing applications and data within the cloud. Another thing, as Kostov mentioned, software licensing. Migration to AWS, leveraging native services, allowed us to retire and get rid of some of the traditional, more on-premise data center-centric applications that you would have to buy licensing for because it was part of AWS native services already. Migrating to AWS is, and this slide kind of is going to tell you that there is a service for almost everything you have. This happens to be a VMware to AWS technology mapping. So if you're running a segmentation product, well, AWS has VPCs. If you're looking at storage, you have infrastructure storage managed by AWS, as well as Elastic Block Storage. So there are services for all your traditional on-premise hardware and services in AWS. Some of the checklists here, and this is something that Kostov has mentioned also, and Sean will talk about later, is migrating from a traditional data center to the cloud is much different than, say, migrating a data center across cities, across the country. And really what we did is we realized that we needed help when doing this to ensure we do it correctly. We leveraged AWS and their services and their assessment process to basically ensure that we're taking into account all the potential pitfalls, services, and other things that maybe we don't know about during the migration process. And basically, what AWS did for this project is to make sure that we're looking at the entire picture from end to end. Shared responsibility. So with AWS, they share our responsibility, where AWS is securing of the cloud, and ultimately we're responsible for securing our data in the cloud. So we're focusing on securing our applications and our data. Some examples also is where we're, as a customer, we're responsible for, say, patching of the EC2 instance and the guest OS and the software that's installed on it, or the security configurations, where AWS is responsible for services like S3, DynamoDB, and the infrastructure that those services run on. In the end, as a customer of AWS, we're still responsible for securing our data and our applications. Security is built into the foundation. And basically, as we saw this, I'm going to pick a couple of the outcomes. And what really this is going to demonstrate is, some of the things, you have all these different realizations that you can get from this migration. But one of them is encryption. Encryption is part of the service built in. You don't have to buy third-party bolt-on products. You don't have to worry about, is it going to work? It works natively within the infrastructure, nothing extra to buy. Compliance policies. With compliance and policies, we have several different services within AWS that you can leverage to ensure that you're maintaining your compliance along the way and or policies that you set along the way. Our outcomes. As we've done the migration, we migrated over 2,200 servers from on-premise into AWS. 340 applications migrated to AWS. Migrated over 1.2 petabytes of storage, and we were able to decommission over 1,400 VMware servers. And again, some of this points to what Kostov pointed out and what Sean will talk about later is savings on licensing. So some of the future state of workloads in AWS because, yes, you do the migration. You say you're done. And when we've done the migration, we've taken a risk-based approach. We did a lift and shift. That's the least riskiest, that's the quickest way. But really, that's your first step. What's the next step is to continue to make that evolution is you need to start to modernize your applications and refactor. That's where you're going to continue to get to ROI. Additionally, some other services that you can potentially leverage is such as AWS Outpost. Looking at AWS Outpost, now you have additional capabilities. You're bringing that cloud into your data center, and you could potentially run latency-sensitive workloads on your infrastructure, but you're still getting cloud-native capabilities all in a box that's inside your data center. Additionally, if you have regulatory requirements that you need to keep your data in a certain state in a certain country, this could potentially be leveraged to fulfill that regulatory requirement. And with this, I am going to introduce Sean Regenbacher, and who's going to talk about the journey to AWS.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm Sean Regenbach. I'm responsible for Gilead's delivery and support, which includes the migration program that we've been talking about today. So let me start with saying that migrations are hard. I was responsible for our migration, so I can tell you they can be hard, but they are achievable. Gilead has had great success in our migration program. As you can see here, we started in 2019 as a traditional data center, brick and mortar, hosting our applications and our infrastructure. In 2020, we started to look at the possibility of migrating applications to AWS, but we hadn't formally made that decision. In 2021, we decided we needed a strategic cloud provider. We decided that would be AWS because of AWS's breadth of services and our goals with hosting our applications and our infrastructure. As you can see on the slide, we achieved 50% of our migrations the first year. This was mostly back office apps, less complicated applications. I'm going to introduce a term here, GXP, that we use in the pharma industry. That stands for General Anything Practices. Think of general manufacturing practices, general anything practices. We did not start with applications that have a patient implication. That's what GXP means. We started with simpler stuff and worked our way up in complexity. As we got out into 2022, we started increasing that complexity. We got up to 60% of our applications and infrastructure migrated to the cloud, and again, it was getting more complicated as we went. In 2023, we started working on applications that were not in our North America data centers and all of our GXP applications. Ultimately, Gilead was able to achieve 87% of our original infrastructure hosted in our data centers was moved out to the AWS cloud. But it's a journey. As you can see here, you have to start with assessing what you have, mobilizing a plan, and then ultimately migrating. That's easy to say, but it's harder to do. You have to start with a landing zone. You can't just start migrating applications to the cloud. You have to have somewhere for them to go. For Gilead, this meant working with our security team, establishing security guardrails, governance, and controls before we migrated anything. Then we had to have an inventory. What is it that you're going to move? We talked to our infrastructure team that was previously hosting these applications. We used things like our CMDB and talking to the application teams to assess how big is the migration, what is possible. Then we started building a migration plan. One of the keys to Gilead's success was our strategy with our partners. We made a decision early on that if we were going to give the run rate, Gilead's dollars, to AWS, we wanted AWS to be accountable for the success of our migration. So we hired ProServe, which Costa represents, to lead our migration. But in addition to that, one important success factor for us was we hired our managed service provider, which is Cognizant, to do the migration, the actual hands-on keyboard work. We made that decision because they're the application support partner today. who knows your app better than the team that supports it? So combining ProServe with Cognizant from a partner perspective was critical to our success. From a methodology perspective, you heard Kevin talk about the fact that we did a lot of lift and shift. We made that decision for 3 reasons. Number one, as a pharma company, we have lots of commercial off-the-shelf apps. So these are software apps running on servers. So it's easy to lift and shift to them. Not a lot of architectural transformation is required. The second reason was for speed of execution. You can move faster if you're not making a lot of changes. And then the last one was risk. Again, if you're not changing anything, if you're just essentially rehosting the application in the cloud, it reduces your risk. So we did a lot of lift and shift. We didn't only do lift and shift, but a lot of our migration were lift and shift. Then we started building a rough plan and timeline. We worked with ProServe and Cognizant and our partner community to start figuring out what does it take? How many weeks? What are the steps? And we built that rough plan and timeline. I'll stop here and tell you, as soon as you have a plan and timeline, don't get married to it. It's going to change. I assure you. You're going to have lots of problems, and your application teams are going to have scheduling. They have their own priorities. So you have to start somewhere. You get a plan, you start executing against it. Gilead used AWS's application migration service heavily. There are a lot of advantages to MGN. It is multi-region. It minimizes cutover times for application teams. It allows block-level storage copies of servers. It's literally a bit-for-bit copy of a server that you're moving out to the cloud. This tied nicely to our lift and shift strategy. It also reduces errors in your migration because you're not changing anything as you copy this server out to the cloud. MGN is fantastic for that. It also allows you to fast-track migrations and reduce downtime. Remember, these applications serve a business function for your company. So it's not about the migration or the migration team or your cloud-first strategy. It's about applications. These applications deliver something for your company. So minimizing downtime and getting the app up and running in the cloud is critical to the application team. This also allows for movement of really complex software that's been installed on these servers, again, because you're not making any changes. And then lastly, and very importantly, I want to mention right-sizing. A lot of organizations move to the cloud to save money. And we actually, as Gilead, will save money with our migration. I'll talk about that later. But you can spend more money in the cloud if you don't do it right. One of the things we did using MGN and the way we did our migration is we right-sized compute and storage as we went. Optimizing the workloads as you move them to cloud will save you money in the end and will make your migration successful, and MGN helped us do that. I mentioned earlier GXP. You can see it on the slide here. For us in pharma, any of those applications, again, that have a patient implication are classified as GXP. Working with AWS, we took advantage of their automated continuous compliance product. What this allows for is, in an automated fashion, allows the application to stay compliant as you're migrating it to the cloud. It reduces red tape, it speeds up the documentation process, and ensures that continuous compliance. For Gilead, we focused in 3 areas during our migration: on account compliance, EC2 for compute, and then RDS for databases. And we're expanding later, but during the migration, we focused on those 3 items. This helps the app teams because it reduces the time they're working on compliance, allows them to more effectively engage in the migration and other things that they need to do. It improves staff productivity because they're not working on GXP during the migration. Again, they can do those other things. As Gilead moves forward, we will be ramping up to 20 additional services, after our migration, which I'll hit on in just a few moments. So what does the timeline look like? It's really broken down into many smaller steps. For Gilead, we found that it took us about 12 weeks for an application. And when I say an application, I'm talking about dev and then test and production, the full application in the cloud. Your migration journey might vary slightly, but it's not 1 week, it's not 2 weeks, it's multiple weeks. A key finding for us was when you have applications that have dependencies, upstream, downstream dependencies on each other, for us and likely for you, you'll want to move them together or in close succession. You'll also want to focus on alignment with your security team. Kevin, who spoke earlier, is our Gilead security architect, and I can tell you that as you migrate applications to the cloud, you're going to find problems. You're going to find changes you have to make. And having your security team embedded and helping your migration team and helping make those security decisions and architectural decisions will be key to your success. Another key is stakeholder engagement. If you ask your application teams to do a bottoms up and beg application teams to move to the cloud, you're not going to get this done. You need stakeholder engagement and alignment up front. Make sure you have good communication with them. Make sure you have their buy-in. You'll see on the slide here, there's also a section around change management and documentation. You have to make sure you do those things along the way. If you rush and you don't update CMDB and you don't do change management, it causes lots of support problems along the, after you've migrated the app. So that has to happen along the way. Your migration team is going to have steps in the migration plan where you're standing up infrastructure, where you're planning the cutover with the application teams. These things all take time. Again, start with the lower environments in dev, find your problems, so that when you get to production, you've already solved for those problems. Plan the cutovers with the application teams. Those all have to be in your timeline. For Gilead, we provided hypercare support, post-migration. We found that by doing dev, then doing tests, solving these problems, reduced risk for your actual production cutovers. We had very few problems with production cutovers. And then you just repeat as you go. You saw the numbers Kevin shared earlier, 2,200 servers, over 300 applications. This is how we did it. So let's talk about the Migration Acceleration Program. This was huge for Gilead. You can see there's 6 quadrants that AWS brings to help enterprises move to the cloud, from methodologies, from AWS and partner tools, the AWS partner ecosystem, AWS investment. This is important. I'll hit more on this in just a moment. Training. Costa mentioned it, but I want to talk more about that. And then AWS Professional Services. It's obvious, I've already mentioned that they led our migrations. So let me start with the investment piece. Migrations create financial pressure because you're paying for infrastructure on-prem, you're starting to pay for infrastructure in the cloud, and now you're also paying for a migration team. We mentioned we had ProServe and Cognizant. These things are creating budget pressure you likely didn't plan for. With the MAP credits that come with the Migration Acceleration Program, we were able to fund both our ProServe and our Cognizant teams and offset that cost. And that's a huge part in getting executive stakeholder buy-in to do the migration, to get that business value that Costa talked about early in his presentation. Then there's AWS training. Remember, many of these teams you're moving to the cloud may not have cloud skills. A lot of teams, I can tell you in pharma, they don't care where their infrastructure is hosted. They only care that their application runs. But when you're moving them out to the cloud and you're decentralizing infrastructure, you're moving that away from an infrastructure team and you're allowing these teams now to manage infrastructure, they have to have some cloud skills. We used AWS Skill Builder a lot. We did some classroom training as well, but Skill Builder is key because it allows the application teams to do self-paced online training. They can go through certification programs, but bringing those application teams up to speed as you're migrating is key to your long-term success. So our process and methodology, it's really broken into 3 key quadrants. Your leadership support, I've touched on that, I'll hit on it again. We used an agile model, and then training. For Gilead, we had official communications come from our CIO indicating to the stakeholders and the application teams, we're now on a cloud-first strategy. You're going to play ball. We're going to do these migrations together. Again, you don't want this to be a grassroots thing in your organization. You have to have that executive buy-in, that executive air cover, so that your migration team can move at speed and the application teams know that they need to do this. Do your kickoff meetings. Make sure that the stakeholders and the application teams know what's going to happen. Have office hours. it's program management 101, but communicate, communicate, communicate. If those lines of communication are open with the application teams, you can get this done. Application teams want to know, how does this affect me? How does it affect my app? How does it affect what I'm doing for the company? So make sure that's a two-way street on the communication. It's not all about the cloud team, which I manage. I've done that twice, sorry. It's not about the cloud team. It's not about the migration team. Again, it's about those applications. Start with the easy stuff, work your way up in complexity. That helped us a lot. Be prepared to make architectural decisions. I mentioned that we mostly did lift and shift, but you're going to come across, technical debt like outdated OS platforms that need to be upgraded. You're going to come across architectural changes that need to be made based on how the app was hosted on-prem versus cloud. They won't all be lift and shift. Be prepared to make those decisions. Optimize as you go. I'll mention this a few times in my presentation. Make sure your migration team has financial goals. Make sure the app team understands what it's going to cost to host this app when you get it out in the cloud. And then cloud fluency. We mentioned this. Have a training program in place. Run this concurrently with your migration so that when you get done, you have a more fluent cloud organization than when you started. And the application teams, that their infrastructure and their apps now hosted in the cloud, they can run it out there. So let's come full circle to what Costa was talking about, business value. There has to be a reason to do the migration. I mentioned cost savings. I've talked about optimization a few times. Gilead will achieve multi-million-dollar savings over the next 5 years based on our migration. Again, we forecasted up front what we thought it would what it would cost to host these applications in the cloud. We told the applications what this would cost. We measured the migration team against that. They had goals on compute and storage, and we will ultimately save that. But if you allow your migration team or you don't manage your migration team to the cost, the easiest thing for them to do is over-provision the server, get the application out in the cloud, get it running, the application team's happy, and you've spent way too much money. So make sure that the cost savings is part of your business value. On staff productivity and operational resilience, these go hand in hand. What we have found moving our applications to the cloud is we have fewer incidents. I mentioned earlier that whole process of moving dev, find your problems, move test, find your problems. Now that we have these applications out running in the cloud, we have fewer MSP staff. We can actually take some of that staff and have them work on more proactive things, improving our business. So we are actually seeing that staff productivity. We're seeing that operational resilience based on our migration. It's working for us. Business agility or speed to market is key. Again, with cloud, you're putting infrastructure at the fingertips of those that need it. So that now that these applications are hosted in the cloud, as they want to innovate, they want to make changes, they want to improve, they can do that quickly. So you're giving them that business agility post-migration. Again, one of those business values of the migration. And then I think Costa mentioned sustainability, and Kevin mentioned it as well. Almost every enterprise has goals around saving our planet. AWS can work with you on your carbon footprint. They actually have metrics that they can track along your migration. You can put them on your executive scorecards. You can report up the sustainability improvements that your migration program is driving for the corporation. We did that. Our numbers were double-digit numbers, very significant, very positive, a great supporting and selling point for your migration. So lessons learned. And I'll be the first to tell you it doesn't all work, and it didn't all work for us. I'll hit on something first that didn't work well for us, and then I'll hit on some high points that did work well. When we started, our migration team made a decision to migrate all the applications into a shared account. This works great for speed, but it caused some problems we hadn't thought about. Now I'll give you a couple of examples. Number one, when you move a bunch of applications into one account and you want to charge back, there are services like networking that you can't tag, you can't charge it back. So you create stranded cost for the hosting organization. In this case, my organization, which was the cloud team, the cloud platform team. Another challenge you're creating when you put a bunch of applications into one account is you don't allow them to mature, become cloud mature, become cloud native, because now they can't do things to these applications. You have to force everything through your ticketing process, through your MSP, and you're not allowing those teams to mature. So we actually made a change, midway through our migration, and we said, we're either going to provision accounts by line of business or in some cases by applications. We made those decisions as we went, but that increased agility and it improved our chargeback model. I talked about our vendor model. Again, yours likely be different, but it's an important consideration for you to make upfront. How do you drive the most accountability and success of your migration? For us, that was very clear. It was to put ProServe in control, hold them accountable for the success of the migration, have our trusted application support partner Cognizant actually do the hands-on keyboard work, and I can't stress enough how important that was for Gilead. I talked about the MAP credits. Again, you're going to have financial pressures. Take advantage of the levers that AWS gives you to reduce cost and reduce the cost of your migration. I want to talk about decommissioning and waste a little bit. For us, the point of the migration was ramping down our data centers, ramping down our on-prem footprint, ramping down that carbon footprint. You need a good decommissioning process to go with your migration. If you migrate, but you never do anything about the hardware that's sitting in the data center, you've missed the goal. For us, assuredly. So we not only tracked migrations, but we tracked decommissions. You will also find waste in your data center. We did. So not everything gets migrated. In some cases, you come across a server or some set of infrastructure and the app team says, I'm not even using this. And so be prepared to do the decommissioning work, make it a key metric, track that as part of your migration program. It will be key to your success. Optimize as you go. We talked about this. Super important to have cost goals for your migration. You can blow your budget in the cloud, but if you pay attention to it and you hold your partners accountable to it, you can actually save money, and Gilead is going to save money. Again, I talked about the forecasting. Have a goal up front. You should have some idea of what it's going to cost to host all these applications in the cloud, and then you should track yourself against that as you go. And if you made bad assumptions, correct as you go so you know what this is going to cost. The app team should know, the executive stakeholders should know, your migration team should know. Have a robust chargeback model. This was key for Gilead. Now, it may be different in different enterprises, but for us, the quandary was this. You're taking infrastructure, which is centrally managed, and you have a team that's responsible for lifecycle management, and you're decentralizing that infrastructure and you're putting lifecycle management in the hands of the application teams. So you have to have a chargeback model to drive financial accountability. If not, you could have someone go provision 100 servers and them not care about the cost because you're paying for it centrally. So this idea of what is it going to cost to run in the cloud and having a chargeback model are hand in glove to your success in the migration and post-migration. Have a standard way to approach configuration changes. A couple things we learned. Things like load balancing, databases. Even though you're doing a lift and shift, you're going to have configuration changes. You need to have a standard approach with your migration team on how you're going to do that, how you're going to handshake with the application team, how it gets documented, how does it get communicated to the support team, are there implications to CMDB? But for the things that are going to change on the app, make sure you track it. We actually had examples at Gilead where the migration team changed something, we had a problem later, it wasn't documented, and we had to go sort that out. So make sure you have a really good process in migration for configuration changes. And then cloud training, we talked about that a lot already. AWS Skill Builder is your friend, online, self-paced. The best example I can give you on that is we started with classroom training. People would sign up for 3-day classes. We'd get all the way up to the classroom date, and we'd have 60% attendance, 50% attendance. And we're trying to understand, well, why is this happening? Well, when somebody signs up for a 3-day class 2 months ago, they have the best intentions to go to a 3-day class. When they get right up on top of it, their job's on top of them and they can't do it. So the benefit for Skill Builder, at least for us, was online, self-paced. The teams could do it when they wanted to do it. And they could consume the training information the way they wanted to. There are training and certification paths. There's gamified events using Cloud Quest. So there's lots of different approaches to how to get this information to the people that need it. So that brings us full circle. This is where Gilead is today. We did lift and shift as our step one. We focused on optimization and financial viability of our migration. That was key to our success. There's always financial pressures in the system. We're now looking at things like application modernization. Can we re-platform some of these apps? Can we re-architect some of them? Does it make sense to go to containers and microservices for some of these apps? Are there apps that we move that are no longer needed? Do we retire some of these apps? So we're looking at that question of application modernization. But maybe even more important than that, we're looking at our landing zone. So I'm going to circle all the way back to where I started. When you start your journey with AWS, you have to have your landing zone, your guardrails, your governance. But you don't have to have a fully mature model. Now, for Gilead, we're doing things like, Costa mentioned, improving our CI/CD automation, improving our guardrails, improving our service catalog. We're building a cloud experience portal. We're making core services available to these application teams that we migrated out, or net new application teams that want to consume cloud. So we're maturing our landing zone and our services. With that, I'll hand it back to Costa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. So you've heard from Kevin and Sean talk about their journey, and I think the next 10 minutes we'll spend about what are the best practices to get started and what are the resources that are available to you at no cost from AWS to get started. So if you're in the planning and strategy phase, creating a change for case is very important. And what that means is creating a very strong business case. The way you can do that is using some of the tools and mechanisms that are listed there. We'll dive deep into each of them. But basically what they do is they help you do rapid discovery of your current infrastructure on premises. You can install some agents, get a more detailed report, use that to create a more holistic cloud economics project or analysis so that you can understand your cost of how much it's going to cost you to run on the cloud. You can do a very detailed readiness assessment to understand which applications or infrastructure is ready for migration, which needs to do change before you can migrate them. So that strategy and planning is very important. And what it does is it starts to form that roadmap that Sean was talking about. Which applications need to go first, which can go second, which may need to wait a little bit because it's a little bit more complicated. So the roadmap starts to start forming. You can create a strong business case, but the business case can help you get initial alignment with leadership, get funding approval, getting a project started. So all these capabilities are important for you to get started. And these things were also in Gilead's slide as the starting points to get started. So let's talk about optimization and license assessment. We call it OLA. So basically, this is a team of AWS experts who will help you get recommendations and optimize your compute, storage, and licensing right on day one, from the beginning. And as you've heard throughout the presentation today, it's important to strategize in the beginning. So as you start to look at your compute and your instances and start to feel, hey, these are over-provisioned instances on premises. I can make them, or lower instances are needed as we go to the cloud, resulting in cost saving. These are the licenses that I can probably avoid going to the cloud. Or if you've bought licenses already, what does your bring your own license model looks like when you go to the cloud? So all those questions get answered. So AWS will provide expert license advice, capacity optimization, and reducing cost. And what we've observed is that customers who've taken advantage of this OLA assessment and an expert team, we've seen 36% average compute cost savings versus the customers who haven't done it. And the reason because that is you've done a more detailed strategy and planning at the beginning. You looked at places where you can optimize your cost. And as a result of a good, solid strategy, your migration speed increases. And this is also very critical because your migration can go span across time. Reducing time leads to reduction in effort, cost, and also the time required for your organization to start leveraging more cloud services. So we've seen around 34% faster migrations, and you can migrate more instances quickly. The second resource that's available to you is Migration Evaluator. So this is basically a team, and along with comes with a tool which removes guesswork from your migration. So you don't have to guess. What it does is you can install a complementary agent-less collector, which conducts a broad-based discovery of having your existing inventory. Once your inventory is there, you can upload it into your system. You can start to create a roadmap. And there are certain advantages of doing this. First is it helps you make faster decision making. So the point is, you get started with something, get started with your journey. So, okay, what's your journey look like? Making some decisions. Then you get expertise from our AWS dedicated team. If you have any questions or technical concerns, you can start to answer or get help on some of those detailed questions. And then you start to form your plan more in detail. The third thing is we talked about finances quite a lot in this presentation. So there's a team of AWS Cloud Economics team that goes deep into your comprehensive business cases, starts to highlight areas where you can optimize, starts to predict your cost. Now, this is very important because when you start talking to your leadership, CIO, CTOs, and even CEO, you want to have a more comprehensive strategy and planning done. So what this team does is they sit down with your experts, and we start to talk about what does your business case look like from a cost perspective? What does the business value summary or savings look like? So you can see that, okay, what is my run rate looking like? What is my infrastructure summary or cash flow summary looks like? These are some of the important factors that you need at the beginning in order to get the right approach. And once you continue to do the migration, you can track them. Hey, where am I on my journey? Do I need to make some decisions? Do I need to change some of the capabilities so that I can continue to meet my plan? So this creates a very comprehensive financial strategy for you to have a good view in the beginning, and then you track them along your way as you continue to migrate. So we talked about AWS Professional Services. That's the team I'm part of. And basically, we've done thousands of migrations with so many customers. So we've come up with a very end-to-end a very lower risk approach to accelerate your VMware migration to AWS Cloud Native Services. And some of the key features that we bring is, once you've done your assessment that we've spoken about earlier, then we start to talk about frameworks. Landing zone, you've heard that word quite a lot. What does it mean is we bring in a more robust structure for you to quickly deploy it. So we come up with best practices, architecture designs, we have some sessions, and we start to deploy it faster. So you have a place to start landing your applications and servers quickly. We talk about our fully automated solutions. So because we've done this so many times, we bring some of our automated designs, and what that means is it starts to increase your velocity. And what we've observed is with accelerating more end-to-end orchestration and automation that we bring in, we call it hyper-automation modules. And what that does is basically starts to eliminate your manual tasks. And what we've seen that around 80% of your manual tasks for migration can be eliminated because the framework can help you fit into that mindset and what are the tools and technologies that we need to bring. So that is another accelerator for you to get started. So not to kind of use some of those capabilities and then you amend it as you go forward. We've also seen, because of that structure, you can start to migrate more servers and applications faster. So we've seen around 4x velocity for migrating your servers, your applications faster, as provided you've done some of the homework. So we've talked about the assessment, talked about some of the migration evaluator, financial analytics, a strategy approach. Once those pieces are in place, then once you start getting into automation, these strategies that you develop in the first place can help you accelerate faster. There will be challenges that you come along the way, but you can tackle them as you go one by one. And as you're migrating it with your preferred partner of choice, and once you start building those servers in the cloud, operations starts to kick in. So your cloud ops and specialized support system is very helpful. You can continue to use your existing team, or if you need help on that, AWS Managed Services can provide you, right from day one, how do I start to manage and operate these instances? What this team does is they bring in more automated patching, compliant solutions. How can I start to see my dashboards? How can I start to see how servers are running? What is the health of them? Observability monitoring on that. They bring in right on day one and then start to scale as you need. But if you need operations help and support, this team can help you. And also, if there are some technical challenges, we bring in technical SMEs from our support team who can start to look at your challenges. So you get help on both sides. You start to do your migration at an accelerated pace. Once your servers are in the cloud or your applications are in the cloud, you start to operate them and start to make efficient use of them. So some of the incentives and support we spoke about, I've summarized them on this slide. So from training and support perspective, we can do some of either they can be skill-based for your team, or we can do immersion days. What that is you can dive deep into particular services. So let's say, for example, when we've decided on a migration strategy and we realize you're going to be heavily using, let's say, RDS or Aurora, but you want to know more about these services, how can you leverage them better? We can start to do immersion days on some of these specific services that may help you, dive deep into technology, how they fit into your landscape, what are the configurations, the right settings to have these services set up in your environment. So these are immersion days, very focused and technical on our AWS services that you are interested in. This also includes a team that can guide you on any VMware-specific questions that you may have. Some of the instances or mapping of those to AWS, that deep dive sessions can also be done. From a technology standpoint, we spoke about application migration service already, but there are more migration tools that AWS has created to help you. To enhance your end-to-end planning, you can have a migration hub journey, and that's important because it's not just at the beginning. As you're migrating, you can actually track it on a dashboard how your migration is happening. So it's kind of like a good executive view, and then you can double-click into that to get more details. And then from a funding perspective or incentives perspective, we spoke about MAP program. We also spoke about support for VMware to AWS migration, and then assessments of all the 3 mechanisms we spoke earlier on how they can be done at no cost in order for you to get started quickly. So in order to summarize, these are the 4 key areas. If you are currently in a strategy or planning phase, start with a case for change. It's very, very important. We spoke in the beginning about why is it important to have business drivers. You heard from Gilead what were the drivers and how they achieved it. And if you want to help get started, AWS can help you with our tools and mechanisms and expert teams. Once you start creating a case and you have a strategy and funding approved, then you can start to leverage ProServe or partners to accelerate some of your migration. We'll bring in some of our automated mechanisms and tools. Once you have a team on the ground, you can start to design a very detailed approach strategy, lift and shift, modernize some of the capabilities, start to get on details around strategy for your applications and servers, what is the right fit for any need, whether it's expired licensing or out of support licenses or OSS versions that you need, dive deep into those details. And then continue to take, and please take advantage of our incentives and support programs in order to help you accelerate through the journey. So that's all we had today. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please take a moment to rate us for this session. The feedback helps us improve. And again, if you have any questions, we'll hang out by the side of the stage for a few minutes. So thank you so much, and enjoy your reInvent.